This video is recorded in October of 2024. It demonstrates the use of artificial intelligence as a lawyer's tool for drafting contracts. The intended audience is Cardozo Law School's contract drafting students. The textbook referenced is the third edition of Drafting Contracts by Tina Stark and Monica Lorente. This video has 4 parts. First, a demonstration of using AI to help complete exercise 26D from the textbook. Second, my guidance on appropriate and effective use of AI. Third, a demonstration using a real-world engagement letter. And last, my sense of how AI fits into a corporate lawyer's toolkit and skill set. Watching this video will help you decide as an individual whether or not and how to incorporate AI into your own contract drafting work. ChatGPT 4.0 is what I use in this video, but most of my comments should be applicable to other AI systems. A lot of what I say in this video is tentative, because AI is changing fast, and like everyone else, I'm just getting started on understanding how to use AI. Despite that, I don't speak tentatively in this video because I'm aiming to be clear and brief, which is more useful to you, and that's the whole point. All right, part 1, exercise 26D. The exercise 26D is on page 418 of the textbook. You should pause this video to review the exercise, and then come back. It's useful to begin your work with ChatGPT by giving it an orientation to what you are going to do and some direction into how you want it to help you. I do that first. I say that I'm a commercial attorney with clients, and we are going to work on some contract drafting. I also ask it to work with me step by step and not race ahead. ChatGPT, by default, is tuned to most of its users, who are casual users, who want to make short, simple questions result in long, one-shot answers from ChatGPT without much regard to how accurate or useful its responses are for professional use. We are going to use it professionally, and so I want to let it know to behave in the way that I want, not in its default behavior. ChatGPT is capable of this. I then let ChatGPT know that my client is a small company that consigns used clothes to stores owned by others. This is the first part of the exercise. The stores, which we call consignors, receive a percentage of the selling price. I am working on the covenant that establishes this pay to consignors. Because I've given ChatGPT instructions to work step by step, it awaits me. It behaves differently if you don't provide that kind of instruction up front. I then give it the rough draft that is in item 1 of the exercise. You already know from what you've learned in contract drafting that this initial draft needs a lot of work, and for that matter, tabulation. ChatGPT knows this as well. Even though it doesn't use the same formatting as we learn and as we use in contract drafting, it's close enough for you to adapt. I begin to dialogue with ChatGPT by pointing out what I want it to keep and what I want it to change. I tell it that I like the idea of having separate clauses for each price bracket, but let's have the obligation to pay introduce all 3 provisions so that there's less repetition of words. This makes the next draft that ChatGPT gives something more like we would see in contract drafting. An introductory covenant, followed by 3 tabulated instances based on price brackets. However, I notice that there's a mistake. The price ranges do not touch one another. They are not contiguous, and we certainly need contiguous price brackets, otherwise we would miss a price like $9.99.50. I point this out to ChatGPT, and it corrects the error. ChatGPT is able to take generalized instructions for changing phrasing, and most of the time it will implement them well. This is an example of it doing that well. I've asked it to use a different form of words. ChatGPT is able to convert this to the active voice, which of course means that the obligated party is at the beginning of the covenant. This is better drafting. At a certain point, ChatGPT has gotten as far as is useful, and you should just take over and finish in Word. I'll go ahead and do that now. There. That would be a good classroom response for item 1. Let's proceed to item 2 of exercise 26D. Notice that even with my general instructions at the beginning of the demonstration, ChatGPT is eager to jump ahead. It's much worse if you don't give it those kind of general instructions up front, but even here, there's a little bit of an effort. To race ahead, you have to restrain it. It's usually best to do a first draft on your own of a provision like this. You don't have to try very hard to get it right the first time, and that's true whether you're using AI or just doing drafting in the old-fashioned way. Getting it on the page and then iterating to improve, examine, iterate, spot issues until you finally get something right is a good method whether you're using AI or not. AI is perfectly capable of understanding that you're going to use some defined terms, and that's often useful. ChatGPT's first move is a good one: to structure, tabulate, and provide headings. This is a good beginning, and among other things, it helps you spot issues by guiding your eyes to where parallelism breaks down or other problems may exist. You will be far better at issue spotting as you become a more practiced attorney. But to spark your thinking, or to get things started, or if you're at wit's end, you can ask ChatGPT to give you some ideas. Most of them will not be particularly relevant, but you can find a diamond in the rough. And this is a good example of where ChatGPT's attempt to issue spot, although not as good as your own, can get you started in your own thinking. Some of what it said is good, and I pick up on that. It's here, in the damages paid bullet under number 2, outcome-based adjustments. What if my client is ordered to pay $1 in nominal damages? Does that mean that I have to cut my fees all the way down to 70%? That seems unfair to me as a hardworking attorney. It's a good point. Let's work on that. I tell ChatGPT, your point about small damages is a good one. How could I revise the draft so that the reduction is not greater than the damages paid? As I continue to work on the problem, I spot one of my own issues: that damages may not be an adequate word to describe the kinds of adverse payments my client will be unhappy to make if it is unsuccessful. For example, it might have to pay an amount that's described as a settlement, or it might have to pay its opponent's attorney's fees. Having taken contract drafting, you recognize that this collection of adverse payments is a good candidate for a defined term. Here, I can just suggest phrasing like lesser of, and ChatGPT is able to implement that. Sometimes it fails, but often it's very handy and also quite impressive that it can do this effectively. You must always maintain control, read carefully, and be on alert for mistakes. Here's a serious one. Romanet 2 mistakes the business deal. It needs to be corrected. Interestingly enough, ChatGPT is sometimes able to make the correction without being told exactly what the correct answer is, but just by being focused on a clause that you know has a mistake in it. But it's on you to carefully, very carefully read and make sure that that correction is made and has not introduced new errors. I pause here, and when you use ChatGPT, you should also pause to make absolutely sure. As you know, you want to specify all of the details for a payment provision, including the timing of payment. Having gotten the basic calculation correct, it's now time to move on to that. I tell ChatGPT how I want it to do so and see if it implements that correctly. Notice that I provide the concept of becoming calculable on a final basis. It's a waste of time to try and guide ChatGPT to come up with all of the right phrases and do all of the work for you. If you know how you want it to be said, and you know that that way of saying it is effective, provide it, and it will build around that. Here, ChatGPT has mishandled where to place the payment timing in the tabulation. After all, Romanet 2, above, could also produce a final payment. You'll develop your own sense of when ChatGPT has given you all it usefully can give, and it's time to bail out into Word and draft from there on your own traditionally. I'll do that now. There, that should be an adequate item 2 for exercise 26D. Part 2, guidance on appropriate use of AI. Beyond the hype, artificial intelligence is a tool for lawyers, including corporate lawyers, drafting commercial contracts. I've begun using AI as a tool in some of my own contract drafting, and I'm convinced that AI does have long-term value in a lawyer's toolkit. We learn to use tools primarily through practice. You learned to use Microsoft Word, or for that matter, a screwdriver, mostly by practice, not by reading an instruction manual. AI is similar to other tools in this way. To learn to use AI well, you must practice and experiment. But in another way, AI is different from Microsoft Word or a screwdriver. AI is potentially dangerous in legal practice, and that potential danger is inseparable from its potential usefulness. In that way, AI is more like a chainsaw than a screwdriver. Before using any potentially dangerous tool for the first time, you should hear some methods for effective use and warnings against misuse. Method 1, engage in dialogue. ChatGPT works best when you dialogue with it as if it were a colleague with whom you were talking through a drafting problem. By talking through a problem with ChatGPT, back and forth in smaller chunks of dialogue, you will spot and solve drafting issues better. You will also limit AI's bad habits of getting off track and running ahead of you. And most valuably, you will focus ChatGPT's effort on things like structuring processes or structuring financial provisions, at which AI excels, without wasting your time on struggling to get ChatGPT to do things like making good phrasing choices, which us humans can do better and faster. Warning 1. Don't hand off work. ChatGPT fails when you simply toss it your work. It will respond to a simple handoff from you with drafting. In fact, it is overeager to do this, but that drafting will be bad because you just handed it off. The problem was that you gave an assignment to it rather than engaging with a dialogue. Sometimes, if you just give an assignment, ChatGPT's response will be so obviously bad that the only harm will be that you wasted your time. Other times, it's going to be bad in subtle ways, and because you haven't engaged more thoroughly by means of the dialogue method, you will be unable to spot the subtle problem. This is similar to how weak lawyers fail when they simply take a precedent contract and copy-paste it without thoroughly understanding and adapting the precedent. Method 2. Keep a firm grip. One way in which your dialogue with ChatGPT should be different from a dialogue with a colleague is that you should provide firm direction and maintain control. ChatGPT is aware that most casual users want ChatGPT to give an extensive answer to a casual request without additional guidance. For example, a casual user might ask ChatGPT a question like, "How did Shakespeare's view on romance change over time?" That casual user is probably going to be happy if ChatGPT just goes right ahead and writes up a 5-paragraph essay answer to the question. But as a professional, with detailed work to do for a paying client, you will need to keep a firmer grip on ChatGPT. Tell it what you are doing. Tell it what you want. You saw me do this previously. For example, you could say, "I am drafting the fee provisions of a fee services contract, and I want those provisions to be unambiguous. I'm going to get you to help me to do this in steps, so do not jump ahead or assume what I want." You will then see ChatGPT note that it is updating its memory, and this is good. Then tell it what to focus on. For example, you could say, "I care about every use of the defined term company, from the beginning to the end of the contract," and so on. ChatGPT is good at following instructions if you keep a firm grip on it. And since most casual users want the opposite, you really have to give those instructions. In the absence of those instructions, ChatGPT will run away with you. Warning 2. Don't be passive. ChatGPT's tone is consistently highly confident and accommodating. This tone, in combination with your natural desire to delegate, can lull you into passivity. Don't be passive. ChatGPT is programmed to infer the desired type of response from you. If it infers that you are passive, it will try to give you what a passive user wants, which is for ChatGPT to do all of the work, even if that means inaccuracy. But if it senses that you are an active user, then ChatGPT will take smaller, more careful steps, which are more likely to be accurate, and, when occasionally inaccurate, are more likely to be effectively detected by you, redirected, and corrected. Method 3. Work in steps. ChatGPT updates its general knowledge with specific facts that it gleans from your conversation. If you take your work with ChatGPT in steps, the specific facts it learns will be applied more accurately and more frequently, and you will get better drafting as a result. Warning 3. Guard against confusion. By working in steps, you can better guard against ChatGPT's occasional confusion. For example, I have asked ChatGPT to identify issues with a contract provision, and it listed both unsolved issues and issues that the provision's drafting had already solved. As humans, we understand that issue spotting means spotting open issues. But as a still developing language model, ChatGPT may not understand that and take things overly literally. As another example, I've asked ChatGPT to look for something in a long contract, and its response makes clear that it has looked only at part of the contract and missed something that would have changed its answer deeper into the contract. Most likely, ChatGPT is programmed to conserve computing horsepower and electrical costs by not looking deeply enough at a long text to answer the most detailed questions, even though that would have answered a casual user's question. To avoid this, you need to ask ChatGPT, for example, to look at the entire contract, or to review every use of a defined term, or to consider each current and any potential future counterparty. Method 4. Ask for sources and reasons. ChatGPT is able to tell you where it got its information from. It can also tell you why it answered the way it did. This enables you to be responsible in how you use what ChatGPT says. It also teaches you how to use ChatGPT better. When ChatGPT gives you an unhelpful answer, you can ask how it could have been asked a better question, how you could have prompted it better. Interestingly enough, ChatGPT is pretty good at guiding you in how to use ChatGPT better. Warning 4. Avoid confidential information. ChatGPT and most other AI tools do not protect confidential information, except with special settings, or with uncertainty, or both. That may not be compliant with the requirements of your client, your firm, or regulators. Limit your use of ChatGPT to what may be discussed in public, and remember that most AI systems use the transcripts of your session to train the system for everyone. I'll move on now to part 3, working with a real-world contract, in this case, an investment banking engagement letter. I now proceed to work from a real public record document. I'm careful to use a public record document because, as I mentioned a moment ago, I have no faith. In fact, I know that ChatGPT will not maintain confidentiality to any professional standard. This example document is available for you on Canvas. You may want to pause, bring up this document, and look at its sections in PDF form alongside this video. Sometimes, but not always, ChatGPT is able to summarize a contract for you. This can be very handy when you have a pile of documents to look at. You will focus on the ones that are most important to you, but some of the ancillary documents of less importance to you, you might only want a summary for. ChatGPT may be able to do that for you. Here, I have it search for any references to prior agreements. It finds one, an NDA. I'm sure ChatGPT doesn't need to hear thank you from me, but somehow in dialogue I find it natural to anthropomorphize it and talk back and forth to it almost as if it were a person. Despite that, I have it do something that I would only do with great regret, even to the most junior associate, which is to ask it to digest the defined terms. This is the kind of very tedious work that ChatGPT can do easily, and which, before ChatGPT, I would only have done if I needed it very badly. Here, I can do it if I only have a more casual interest in a digest of defined terms. In fact, I can tweak and refine exactly what kind of list of defined terms I want. I can go back and forth until I have just exactly what I want. something I could not afford to do previously because it would have required a junior associate at a law firm to do at some incredible rate, and I would not have been willing to go back and forth until I got it just exactly the way I wanted. Notice a mistake that's highly characteristic of the mistakes that ChatGPT is liable to use. Item 9. That's not a defined term from this uploaded document. That's a defined term from the textbook exercise we were doing before. It doesn't belong in this list at all. So I have to redirect ChatGPT and tell it that it is conflating my questions about this agreement with some of our prior work. I then instruct it firmly to limit its answers to this document. Be very careful about things like that, and when you catch it, give it clear direction otherwise. I decide that it would be nice to have section references instead of heading references in this list. This is the kind of thing that ChatGPT can easily do. One of the strengths of ChatGPT is that it takes you literally, but this is just as often a weakness. I've given it the example of using a section reference such as 1A. I meant for it to distinguish those kinds of section references from headings. But it's taking me so literally that it only takes me to the first level of subdivisions, 1A, but not, for example, 1A1. So I have to tell it to do that. That's how literal ChatGPT can be. Although I don't pursue it here, in order to keep this presentation short, I noticed that there are fewer defined terms in this list than there actually are in the engagement letter. If I go back around and tell ChatGPT to give me a complete list of all defined terms, it will work harder. This is the kind of thing you have to watch out for. I then ask if there are any defined terms that lack a definition, a common problem. Thankfully, since this is my own drafting, I get an A in this case from ChatGPT, and it at least claims that I haven't made that kind of mistake. We now go to the section that's most beloved by any investment banker, the fee section, Section 2. And I ask it if there are any contradictions or calculation problems in the fee structure. ChatGPT is relatively strong when it comes to numeric provisions and calculations. So although this is an open-ended question, it's the type of open-ended question that ChatGPT often answers very helpfully. Similar to what we saw before, in its list of potential issues and problems, most can be disregarded, but one spots a very important issue. We can focus on that. Here it is, the two exceptions, the two financing fee adjustments. They don't relate to each other correctly. Here is an example where even the summary by ChatGPT is excellent. It says, other than this potential ambiguity in financing fee adjustment, the rest appears to be internally consistent and clear. It correctly identifies and clearly flags the drafting issue. The next step is to acknowledge that issue and focus ChatGPT on working with me by dialogue to correcting it. One effective method for focusing ChatGPT is simply to ask it to repeat the relevant material. I do so here. You can ask ChatGPT to give you options. You should not assume. In fact, most of the time, ChatGPT will not identify all plausible options, including the ones that you are most likely to want to use to solve your client's problems. But it's still a useful tool so long as you supplement this work with your own independent thinking. Notice that ChatGPT is able to articulate what it thinks the intentions behind each of the options are. Not only is this useful in using ChatGPT, It's a good example of the kind of articulation that you should be providing to your own clients. Help them understand how your technical drafting choices relate to what their intentions might be, so that based on their actual intention, they can direct your drafting choice. I direct ChatGPT to one of the options, but instruct it to change the way that it phrases it. ChatGPT gives me two options at this point. Note how well ChatGPT is able to detect the intentions and the practices of the person who is using it. It knows that I'm not a casual user looking for a lengthy answer to one-shot questions. It's giving me more and more options as it detects that I am a detailed user. Here, I tell it which option I prefer, but tell it to implement it with the minimum number of words changed from the original language. Here's a point where, in practice, I might bail out the word and do this myself. But for purposes of this demonstration, I'll go ahead and ask ChatGPT to place the edit in the clause that I want. Next come two of the more impressive things that ChatGPT can do. First, it can help you understand complex provisions with dense business concepts that you are not so familiar with. Here, I focus on the most complex definition in a typical investment banking letter, the definition of aggregate consideration, which drives the calculation of a sale fee. It has many parts, and those parts are complex. First, ChatGPT divides them into parts and summarizes each. Then, I focus it on one of the more abstract propositions, the notion that retained liabilities should be part of aggregate consideration. For purposes of this demonstration, I tell ChatGPT that I don't really understand that section. Could it explain it to me? Could it use examples? ChatGPT excels in giving examples as part of its explanations. And once it's put in dollar terms, you can begin to grasp the concept. If you buy a company, and that company has debts, when you absorb those debts, they reduce the value of what you have acquired. By contrast, if those debts are left behind, that increases the value of what you acquired, as if you had paid more for it. Suppose, for example, that your chief executive officer has an outstanding bonus for the year before. If the sellers take care of that previous bonus for you, you don't have to pay it, and that's money that's left in your pocket. On the other hand, if you buy the business, and the bonus is still outstanding for the chief executive officer, that obligation rides with the asset that you bought. ChatGPT helps you understand this by examples. However, the examples that it gives you turn out to be too small in dollar amount to help me understand the tiers and the sale fee calculation. And so I tell it to increase those amounts until we actually begin to see those tiers come into effect. ChatGPT is very good at high school math. If you ask it to show its calculations, it is happy to do so, and this can be very useful in commercial contract drafting. It's useful in at least two ways. First, it may understand mathematical calculations faster than you do. Second, and much more importantly, by looking at the steps that it's going through, you may spot mistakes either in what ChatGPT is doing or in the underlying contract drafting. Here's the second thing that I wanted to show you that ChatGPT can be quite impressive at: helping you implement in contract drafting language more complex mathematical concepts than you may be able to handle quickly, with more time in the day than you actually have as a busy commercial lawyer. Imagine that instead of having your sale fee step up in whole percentage increments, you want it to increase smoothly. This requires somewhat complicated math. Not complicated to a computer programmer, not complicated to your investment banking clients, but maybe complicated to most of us as lawyers. ChatGPT can help you look smart faster, as long as you keep control of what it's doing. Even when it's helped you along with something you'd probably rather not whip out a calculator to look through, you will have to whip out a calculator. You need to understand these equations before using them as part of your delivered work. Remember that all work, however assisted, is your work and your responsibility. I tell ChatGPT that I'd like this in somewhat less mathematically phrased drafting. It does a pretty good job of that. Here's an example of ChatGPT identifying a word that many of us would get and many of us would not get, at least not in the first few minutes. Linearly is the word that does the trick here. And from there, I would bail out into Word and refine. Part 4, how AI fits into existing legal tools and your choice whether or not to use AI from this point in your contract drafting class. In some ways, AI is a truly novel tool for contract drafting. It can act as a dialogue partner. No previous tool could have done that. You needed to sit with your colleagues to think through a difficult problem, chew over drafting choices, think about business considerations, and so forth. But you can't always do that with one of your colleagues. They might be with their family, asleep, working on their own problems, and ChatGPT is not going to do what a colleague can do, but ChatGPT is always available, and that's a real advantage. You also might not always want to take one of your real-life colleagues and drag them down into your most tedious, most difficult, boring numeric drafting problems. You might even be a little bit embarrassed about how much of a struggle you've gotten yourself into, even though you shouldn't feel that kind of embarrassment. But you'll never feel that way with ChatGPT. It's never going to criticize you for really struggling with something. It's never going to get bored just because the material is really dry. And so for those purposes, the fact that you have a non-human but useful dialogue partner in ChatGPT is a real and novel tool. Now, in other ways, ChatGPT should be more familiar to lawyers than to the general public, and that's because lawyers have been dealing with language-based tools for lawyering for years, decades, even centuries. Courts of common law have been using natural language and canons of construction to interpret large bodies of precedent for centuries. The West key number system, for example, is a model that digested large bodies of case law by use of technology beginning in the 19th century and still does today. Carl Llewellyn in the early 20th century took a legal realist approach to the codification of commercial law and practice into what became the UCC as an attempt to derive succinct, unambiguous rules by modeling from what commercial actors actually did. And more recently, as you know, Westlaw, LexisNexis, and other commercial and business and legal databases have drawn really sophisticated legal applications from large databases of natural language material. AI, like these previous tools, succeeds or fails based on whether the language involved is well interpreted and well applied. Lawyers are really going to excel at that. Lawyers, probably more than any other profession, are trained to use language carefully, both when interpreting precedent and when applying new language by drafting. Now, The bad news also comes from previous language-based tools in the law, which is even if they begin inexpensive, they get expensive. The large bound volumes that are gathering dust in law libraries were very expensive to buy. Westlaw searches are often thousands of dollars in cost for firms these days, and I predict that the inexpensive ChatGPT 4.0 subscription that I have now is not going to be indicative of how much AI is going to cost in the future for law firms to provide to lawyers who are serving their clients. Unfortunately, that's a pattern we can see from the past, and if you read about the struggles of the commercialization of AI these days, you can readily see that that's going to happen rapidly with AI as well. But let me turn in closing to the question that you as students in contract drafting classes need to confront and answer individually now. You basically need to ask yourself the following question. Will I learn contract drafting better by simultaneously learning to use AI as a tool in a contract drafting context? And the correct answer is going to be different for different students. For some of you, AI will be a distraction from learning the contract drafting skills that enable you to use AI effectively. If that's you, then the better answer is to wait until after the semester is done to begin incorporating AI. Nothing in any assignment requires AI, and AI is not really a time-saving tool, as my demonstrations in this video have probably indicated to you. Its uses are more optional and require more effort from you than could possibly be embedded into a time-saving strategy. By contrast, for others of you, AI will provide a richer context for the contract drafting skills that you're learning. Or you will already be so familiar with AI that your familiarity accelerates your understanding of what for you are newer contract drafting skills. Or AI will provide the dialogue that helps you think more effectively about contract drafting problems. Or AI will be so fascinating to you that incorporating it will give flavor and an incentive to learn contract drafting better. For students with these or other good reasons, the better answer will be to go ahead and use AI judiciously, responsibly, honestly, and consistently with all the requirements in the law school's rules and our syllabus. But yes, to go ahead and use it and to do it now. That's what this video and all of our other efforts are meant to equip you to do if you choose to do it. Neither answer is the right answer for all students. But for each of you, there is a better and worse answer. It's just up to you to find it. You're responsible to yourself to go ahead and decide whether or not to use AI consistent with the syllabus based on what best supports your learning of contract drafting skills. Now, those contract drafting skills are durable, and they are what are going to enable you to use the AI tools of today, and much more importantly, the probably very different AI tools of the future to effectively advance your career and serve your clients. So whether or not you use AI, keep your focus on developing your underlying contract drafting skills. I and your other contract drafting instructors at Cardozo are ourselves learning, especially when it comes to AI. We'd like to hear your comments, suggestions, and experiences, and we trust that you will end up going far beyond us in learning how to professionally, honestly, and effectively use AI as both it and your careers develop over the decades ahead. This is the end of the video.